It started on a Sunday afternoon in April. The air was thin, warm, and strangely electric over Talladega Superspeedway. A crowd of 100,000 fans had come for what they thought would be another high-speed ritual of fenders and engines. But nobody that day would remember the winner. Nobody would remember the wrecks. Instead, they would remember the sound, or rather, the absence of it. It was the quietest roar NASCAR had ever heard. Fans at the grandstands didn't know it yet. But in the quiet hum of a race car that day lived the beginning of one of the most controversial chapters in American motorsport history. A chapter that lasted less than the time it took to change tires on pit road. Some say it was genius. Others call it a scandal. But everyone agrees on one thing. It was an engine unlike any the sport had seen, and it vanished just as quickly as it arrived. Before that afternoon, NASCAR was a kingdom ruled by V8 muscle. Big displacement, big power, big, angry noises that made your chest rattle and your heart thump. Fans came for the visceral, for the thrill, for engines you could feel. But underneath that tradition lay a quiet war, one waged in design rooms, testing facilities, and boardrooms thousands of miles from the ovals themselves. The players were familiar names, teams steeped in history, manufacturers jockeying for glory, people with reputations as deep as the tire tread they burned at Daytona and Charlotte. But there was one newcomer, a group of engineers and dreamers who believed they had crafted the next step in racing evolution. They called it the Falcon Series X1 engine. It wasn't just another crate motor slapped into a stock car. It was a revolution disguised as a race engine. Built in a secret factory in Michigan, funded by a string of venture capital and a few wealthy patrons who loved racing more than profits, the X1 was engineered to extract power in ways that defied conventional NASCAR logic. Lightweight, balanced, efficient, and eerily quiet. And when I say quiet, I mean ominous. The team that developed it, a ragtag but brilliant collective, called themselves Falcon Performance Labs. They were outsiders, not Detroit big shots, not established NASCAR allies, just a bunch of ex-engineers from aerospace and formula racing, guys who once worked on jets and Le Mans prototypes. They were dreamers who believed NASCAR was overdue for innovation. They convinced a promising driver, a rising star named Ryan McCall, Southern-born, Midwestern-bred, with sponsors eager for a breakthrough, to test their engine under the hood of his number 72 stock car. For months before that Sunday, rumors swirled through garage lanes. "Some engine's so good it's illegal before we even see it," said one crew chief, laughing over a cooler of energy drinks. "They're going to get fined, mark my words." But nothing could have prepared anyone for what happened at Talladega. Qualifying had been impressive in the X1-powered car, but not earth-shattering. It wasn't until the green flag dropped that the world realized how extraordinary and unsettling this engine truly was. At first lap, McCall rocketed off the line. Fans in the stands expected a growl, a wave of exhaust, a thunderous signature that stock car racing had defined for half a century. But all they got was a deep, strange purr, like a high-performance HVAC system humming in a luxury condo. By lap 3, McCall had cleared the field. By lap 5, he had a 2-second lead. By lap 10, the commentators were whispering in disbelief. "Is this real?" one announcer asked, voice cracking with excitement. "Has NASCAR lost control of the competition?" Nobody, not rival teams, not fans, not even NASCAR officials, knew what hit them. McCall wasn't just faster. He was untouchable. Draft packs that normally formed like battling armies on high-banked ovals couldn't reel him in. The Falcon engine breathed in a way that seemed unnatural, effortless. McCall drove like he was floating on rails. He lapped slower cars with surgical precision. Fans at home leaned forward. Trackside crowds stood on chairs. Social media caught fire. Hashtag FalconX1, hashtag McCallMagic, hashtag NR Game Changer. It was the kind of moment that should have been electric. Instead, it was strangely calm. The roar fans expected was replaced by an almost science fiction silence. Power without noise. And when McCall crossed the finish line alone, a full 8 seconds ahead of the second-place car, the stadium was stunned into applause that felt tentative. But that was only the beginning. Nobody had anticipated what happened next. After the race, NASCAR officials gathered in a windowless trailer on the backstretch. The tension was thick enough to taste. Crew members of rival teams hovered outside, nervously sipping coffee. waiting for a verdict that could change the sport forever. Inside, blue suits and clipboards debated things not written in the rulebook. Was this engine legal? It passed initial inspection, but engineers inside NASCAR had never seen anything like it. They argued about tech caveats, performance windows, interference patterns, all while the clock ticked toward the next event. 3 hours later, NASCAR announced its ruling. The Falcon X1 was banned. Not suspended, not restricted. Flatly, unequivocally banned from competition. Racers and fans were dumbfounded. The ban was immediate. McCall's victory was disqualified. All points forfeited. The engine was declared non-compliant with NASCAR's spirit of competition. And as quietly as it arrived, the Falcon X1 was gone. But that first race, it remained in record books as the shortest-lived innovation in NASCAR history. For McCall, the fallout was personal. Sponsors who once smiled for cameras now avoided his gaze. Rumors swirled that he knew more about the engine's design than he admitted. Some insiders whispered that the engine was a secret manufacturer test, a way for a major automaker to sneak tech into racing under an unknown banner. Accusations flew. Lawsuits threatened. Friendships frayed. Suddenly, a driver once destined for stardom was mired in controversy. It felt like winning a championship, McCall later confessed in a raw, emotional interview, only to have the rug pulled out from under me before anyone could see it fully. And the engineers? The team at Falcon Performance Labs found themselves in a storm they never expected to create. One moment, they were innovators on the brink of fame. The next, they were pariahs accused of undermining a sport built on tradition. In press releases and official statements, NASCAR maintained the decision was about preserving competitive balance. They said the rules existed to protect fairness, that no single team should have an unchecked advantage. But not everyone agreed. Rumors persisted that internal pressure from powerful manufacturers, the ones with deep, decade-long contracts with NASCAR, played a role. Some believe representatives from Detroit's biggest engine builders quietly lobbied behind closed doors to protect their investments, ensuring the X1 never saw a second lap of competition. There are whispers among mechanics and crew chiefs that NASCAR's rulebook, as thick as it is, still didn't explicitly outlaw what the X1 accomplished. Instead, the spirit of competition clause was invoked, a nebulous term that left room for interpretation and, in this case, swift judgment. When asked about it years later, one anonymous team owner said, "They didn't ban an engine. They banned the fear that something new could make them obsolete." Fans were angry. Forums lit up with heated debates. Some cheered the decision, claiming tradition should never be compromised. Others called it the worst moment in stock car racing since the oil embargo of the 1970s. And all the while, footage of McCall's lone, silent victory lap became something of a legend. Grainy videos passed from fan to fan like forbidden treasure. It's still unclear who, if anyone, owns the rights to the Falcon X1 design today. Some claim the company was bought out by a larger corporation. Others say the blueprints were locked away in a vault, forgotten like a fossil. A few conspiracy theorists insist the engine designs were never real, that the one race was a grand illusion engineered to shake up the sport. But McCall swears it was real. "I heard it with my own ears," he once said, voice breaking. It didn't roar like the others. It whispered, and that whisper, that quiet power, should have had its place. Years later, McCall drives vintage tour cars instead of sprint machines. He still gets recognized at gas stations and truck stops. But the question in his eyes, the one he never fully answers, is whether he would trade that one silent victory for a dozen ordinary ones. And what of NASCAR? The organization doubled down on regulations after the ban. They tightened rules, expanded inspection panels, and reinforced the message. Innovation was welcome, as long as it fit within the lines already drawn. Yet every few seasons, when a new engine prototype appears promisingly quiet or efficient, old-timers in the pits whisper the same question. Is NASCAR ready for another Falcon? There's a hidden truth in all of this, one that few people will admit openly. In a sport obsessed with speed and noise, where fans cheer at the sound of V8 engines screaming past 180 miles per hour, perhaps what the Falcon X1 really challenged wasn't the rulebook. Maybe it challenged the identity of the sport itself. Did NASCAR ban the engine because it was unfair? Or because it was too different? Some engineers say the X1 was the beginning of what NASCAR could have become, A new era of hybrid performance, efficiency married to speed, innovation pushing past brute force. But tradition is heavy, and racing bodies tend to cling to the familiar. The Falcon's disappearance left a hole in the story of NASCAR. A what if that lingers like smoke on cool tarmac. There are still pieces of the engine in private collections. One aerodynamicist claims to have seen a cylinder head locked away in a basement lab in Detroit. A retired mechanic insists he has photos buried on an old hard drive. But no complete X1 has ever resurfaced in public. No official archive has published blueprints. No museum displays the engine that outran an entire field and was never seen again. Some say the truth died on that quiet Sunday at Talladega. Others think it's still out there, waiting to be rediscovered. In the end, the Falcon X1 remains one of racing's greatest mysteries. A whisper on a track dominated by roars. A moment frozen in time when innovation outpaced tradition and was banished for it. And so NASCAR keeps turning laps, engines churning, crowds cheering the familiar thunder. But every once in a while, when the wind blows just right across a superspeedway, some fans swear they hear a whisper beneath the thunder. A quiet roar that might have changed everything. And they wonder, what would racing have looked like if that engine hadn't been banned?